Captain Taeho Kim stared at the view screen as explosions lit up the darkness of space. The Velkin princess's ship was breaking apart, and there was nothing his small diplomatic vessel could do to stop it. "Captain, we're getting distress signals from the Royal Transport," So Young Lee called out from her communication station. Her voice was tight with worry. "The Nexari extremists hit them hard. Their ship is falling apart." Taeho gripped the armrest of his command chair. He had come to this star system to help two alien races talk through their problems, not to watch a war start. The Velkins lived in the oceans of their world, breathing water and methane. The Nexari were crystal beings who needed dry, cold places to survive. They had been fighting over mining rights for months. "Yunwoo, can we get close enough to help?" Taeho asked his tactical officer. Yunwoo Park shook his head. "The debris field is too dangerous, sir. And our ship isn't built for rescue work. We barely have life support for ourselves." Through the view screen, Taeho could see the Velkin ship spinning slowly. Parts of it were on fire, even in the vacuum of space. The beautiful blue and silver hull was torn open like a metal flower. He knew Princess Aira was aboard that ship. She had been coming to the peace talks to represent her people. "Sir, I'm picking up a weak signal from inside the ship," So Young said. "It's the princess. She's trapped in Section 7. The air is turning toxic and the walls are falling down around her." Taeho stood up. His mind was already working through possibilities. He was a soldier before he became a diplomat. He had saved people before, but never like this. "What kind of toxic air?" he asked. "Nexari mining gas," Hyunwoo answered after checking his readings. "It burns human lungs in minutes. Even with a suit, you wouldn't last long." Taeho walked to the equipment locker. His hands moved without thinking, pulling out an environmental suit. The suit was old and had been patched many times. It was meant for short spacewalks, not rescue missions in poisonous gas. "Captain, what are you doing?" So Young asked. "Someone has to get her out," Taeho said simply. He started putting on the suit. "If the princess dies, both sides will blame each other. This border dispute will become a war." "Sir, that suit won't hold up," Hyunwoo warned. "The gas will eat through it. You'll die." Taeho sealed his helmet. "Maybe. But if I don't try, she'll definitely die. And then millions more will die in the war that follows." He moved to the airlock. Through his helmet radio, he could hear So Young trying to contact the Velkin ships for help. They were too far away. By the time they arrived, it would be too late. The airlock opened and Taeho pushed himself toward the dying ship. Space was full of floating metal and ice. He had to dodge pieces of debris that could punch through his suit. The Velkin ship grew larger as he got closer. He could see the hole torn in Section 7. Inside the ship, emergency lights flashed red. Taeho pulled himself through twisted corridors. The air was thick with yellow gas that made his eyes water even inside his helmet. He followed the princess's signal deeper into the ship. He found her in what used to be a meeting room. Princess Aira lay unconscious under a fallen beam. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien to humans. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow softly. Instead of hair, she had long tentacles that moved like they were underwater. Even unconscious, she looked graceful. Taeho tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. His suit was already making warning sounds. The toxic gas was eating through the seals. He could smell it now, sharp and burning. He used a piece of broken metal as a lever. The beam moved just enough for him to pull the princess free. She was breathing, but barely. Velkins could survive in human air for a while, but not in this poison. Taeho lifted Princess Aira in his arms. She was lighter than a human, but her body was longer, with arms and legs that seemed to bend in too many places. He started back toward his ship. Halfway there, his suit failed completely. The yellow gas rushed in, and Taeho felt like his lungs were on fire. Every breath was agony. His eyes burned, and he could taste blood in his mouth. But he kept moving. The princess stirred in his arms. Her large, dark eyes opened and looked at him. She said something in her own language, but he couldn't understand. All he could do was keep walking. His legs stopped working properly. Taeho fell to his knees, still holding the princess. The corridor spun around him. He could feel his body shutting down as the poison did its work. But the airlock to his ship was just ahead. Using the last of his strength, Taeho pushed Princess Aira through the airlock. He fell face first onto the metal floor as the door sealed behind them. "Medical emergency." So Young's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Get them both to the medical bay." Hyunwoo was there, pulling off Taeho's broken helmet. "Stay with us, Captain." "You did it." "She's alive?" Teho tried to speak, but only blood came out. His vision was getting dark around the edges. Through the dimness, he could see Princess Aira sitting up. She was looking at him with those strange, beautiful eyes. She seemed to understand what he had done for her. The last thing Teho remembered was the princess reaching out with one graceful hand to touch his face. Her skin was cool and smooth. Then everything went black. On the Velkin command ship, Queen Mi-young watched the security recording of the rescue. Her daughter was safe. The human captain was fighting for his life. The Queen's expression was unreadable, but her large eyes never left the screen as she watched the human carry her daughter to safety, even as his own life drained away. The rescue was over, but Teho's real problems were just beginning. Teho woke up in a room that looked like it was made of living coral. The walls curved gently and glowed with soft blue light. Strange machines hummed quietly around his bed. Everything smelled like the ocean. He tried to sit up, but his body felt wrong. His left arm wouldn't move properly. When he tried to breathe deeply, sharp pain shot through his chest. His throat felt raw, like he had been screaming for hours. "You are awake," a voice said in careful English. Teho turned his head and saw a tall Velkin in flowing robes. The alien's skin was darker blue than the princess's, and white scars covered his arms. "I'm Dr. Wu Jin. You have been sleeping for 21 of your days." "The princess?" Teho's voice came out as a whisper. "Princess Aira lives because of you," the doctor said, "but your body paid a heavy price. The poison damaged your lungs and nervous system. We have repaired what we can, but some harm is permanent." Teho tried to move his left arm again. The fingers barely twitched. "Will it get better?" "Perhaps a little with time. But you will never be as you were before." The doctor's large eyes showed something that might have been sympathy. "You are lucky to be alive. Most humans would have died from what you breathed." Over the next few days, Teho learned to walk again. His left leg was weak and he had to use a cane. Breathing was hard work. But he was alive. And according to the doctors, that was more than anyone had expected. Yunwu and So Young visited him every day. They brought news from the diplomatic mission. The Nexari extremist had been arrested. The peace talks were moving forward, but there was worry in their eyes that they tried to hide. "What aren't you telling me?" Teho asked on his 10th day awake. Hyunwoo and So Young looked at each other. Finally, So Young spoke. "The Queen wants to see you. Today. It's not a request." An hour later, 2 Velkin guards escorted Teho through corridors that seemed to be carved from a single giant shell. The palace was underwater, built on the ocean floor of Velka Prime. Through the transparent walls, Teho could see fish and other sea creatures swimming by. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into blue darkness above. Queen Mi-young sat on a throne that looked like it was made of crystallized water. She was larger than her daughter, with tentacles that moved constantly around her head like a crown of living silver. Princess Aira stood beside the throne. When she saw Teho, she smiled. It was a human expression that looked strange on her alien face, but it seemed genuine. "Captain Teho Kim," the Queen said. Her voice was deep and musical, like whale song. "You saved my daughter's life with your own. This creates what we call Thamor, a debt of blood and breath." Teho leaned on his cane. "Your Majesty, I was just doing my duty as a peacekeeper." "No debt is needed." The Queen's tentacles stopped moving. In the sudden silence, Teho realized he had made a mistake. "You think our customs are meaningless?" the Queen asked. Her voice was colder now. "No, Your Majesty. I just meant, a life debt cannot be dismissed," the Queen continued. "You are now Thamor to Princess Aira. You will remain here as her guardian until death takes one of you." Teho felt the room spin around him. "Your Majesty, I have duties to my own people. I need to return to Earth. Your duties are here now." The Queen stood up. She was even larger than Teho had thought. "Unless you consider this a burden? An insult to our ways?" The threat was clear. Teho had studied Velkin history. They were a proud warrior race. 3 times in the past 200 years, alien species had tried to reject Velkin customs. Each time it led to war. The Velkins had won every time. "I don't understand," Teho said carefully. "What does it mean to be Thamor?" Princess Aira stepped forward. "It means you are my sworn protector. You will live in the palace. You will guard my life with your own. In return, you will have honor, wealth, and the respect of our people." "It sounds like prison," Teho said without thinking. The Queen's tentacles flared out like an angry cat's fur. "Prison? You call serving the royal family prison? Mother, Princess Aira said quietly. He is still weak. He doesn't understand our ways yet. The queen looked at her daughter, then back at Teho. You have 3 days to decide. Accept the honor of Thymor, or we will consider it an insult that requires satisfaction. Teho knew what satisfaction meant in Velkan culture. Trial by combat or worse, and not just for him. If he refused, it could mean war between humans and Velkans. That night, Hyunwoo and So Young sat with him in his room. They had spent all day trying to find a diplomatic solution. Earth Command is furious, Hyunwoo said. They want you back. But they also don't want a war. The Velkan military is already moving ships to the border systems, So Young added. If you refuse, they'll see it as humans rejecting their entire culture. Teho stared out the window at the alien sea life. So I stay here forever or people die. There might be another way, So Young said. We could fight it in the galactic courts. Argue that forcing you to stay violates human rights. How long would that take? Teho asked. Years, maybe decades. And in the meantime? Hyunwoo shrugged. Cold War at best, real war at worst. Teho closed his eyes. He thought about his apartment on Earth that he would never see again. He thought about his sister and her children. He thought about Princess Aira, who had seemed genuinely grateful for his help. There's no choice, is there? He said finally. His friends didn't answer. They didn't need to. The next morning, Teho stood before the queen again. This time, the entire royal court was present. Hundreds of Velkans watched from the galleries. I accept the honor of being Thymor to Princess Aira, Teho said. The words felt like stones in his mouth. The queen smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth, then let the binding ceremony begin. As the alien priests began to chant in their ancient language, Teho caught sight of Hyunwoo and So Young in the crowd. They would leave tomorrow, returning to Earth without him. He was truly alone now, bound by alien law to protect a princess he barely knew. But as Princess Aira stepped forward to place the golden collar of Thymor around his neck, she whispered something in English. Thank you, she said. I will try to make this bearable for you. It wasn't much comfort, but it was something. Teho stood straight as the collar clicked into place. He was no longer Captain Teho Kim of Earth. He was Thymor, guardian to an alien princess, prisoner of his own heroism. 6 months had passed since Teho became Princess Aira's guardian. The golden collar around his neck had grown lighter, or maybe he had just gotten used to its weight. His damaged body had healed as much as it ever would. He could walk without a cane now, though his left arm still felt weak and his breathing was never quite right. The palace under the ocean had become his world. He knew every corridor, every hidden passage, every guard post. The other palace guards had accepted him slowly. At first they saw him as an outsider, a human who didn't belong, but Teho had proven himself by learning their fighting style and their customs. Velkata was the Velkan martial art, and it was nothing like human combat. It flowed like water, using an opponent's strength against them. Teho's damaged arm made it harder to learn, but he practiced every day. Master Donghyun, the weapons trainer, said he was getting good for a human. Your people fight like rocks, Master Donghyun had told him, hard and straight. But water defeats rock by flowing around it. Princess Aira spent most of her days in lessons. She studied law, economics, military strategy, and diplomacy. Teho was always nearby, watching for threats. At first, he had expected assassins and poisoners. Instead, he found that the real danger was boredom and politics. The princess was smart. She asked good questions and saw problems that others missed. When her economics teacher explained trade agreements, she wanted to know how they affected ordinary Velkans. When her military advisors talked about fleet movements, she asked about the cost in lives. You think differently than other Velkans, Teho observed one day after a particularly intense lesson about colonial management. My tutors say the same thing, Aira replied. They don't mean it as a compliment. They were in her private study, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing star maps and trade routes. Aira could make the displays move with small gestures of her tentacles. To Teho, it looked like she was conducting an orchestra of light. Maybe thinking differently isn't a bad thing, he said. Mother thinks it is. She says I'm too soft for leadership, too interested in what other species think. Teho had learned not to criticize the queen directly. Even as Thymor, there were limits to what he could say. What do you think? I think the galaxy is changing. We can't just stay in our oceans and pretend the rest of the universe doesn't exist. Other species have things to teach us. It was a dangerous opinion in Velkan society. Most Velkans believed their way of life was perfect, and that other species were inferior. The Queen had built her power on that belief. Be careful who you share those thoughts with, Tejo warned. As the months passed, Tejo began to notice things. Conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Guards who watched him too carefully. Messages that arrived at odd hours for certain nobles. His military training kicked in. He started keeping notes, tracking patterns. What he found worried him. Duke Jinho was the Queen's cousin and one of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom. He controlled the military academies and had strong support among traditional Velkans. Lately, he had been having many private meetings with other nobles who opposed Princess Era's progressive ideas. Tejo began following the Duke carefully. It wasn't hard. As Thamor, he had access to most areas of the palace. He learned that Duke Jinho was planning something for the Conclave of Tides, a great gathering that happened once every 3 years. The conclave was when all the important Velkan nobles came together to discuss policy and renew their loyalty to the royal family. It would happen in 2 weeks, and Princess Era would be required to attend. One night, Tejo was patrolling the gardens when he overheard a conversation that chilled his blood. The princess has been infected by human ideas, Duke Jinho was saying to someone Tejo couldn't see. She talks about equality and cooperation with inferior species. If she becomes queen, she will destroy everything we have built. What do you propose? Asked another voice. The conclave provides an opportunity. During the tide dance, all participants enter a trance state. They become vulnerable. An accident could happen. And if the queen discovers our involvement? The queen will understand that only the strong deserve to rule. If Princess Era cannot protect herself, she was never worthy of the throne. Tejo crept closer, trying to see who the Duke was talking to. Through the coral trees, he caught a glimpse of the other person. It was Admiral Subin, commander of the palace guard. When? The admiral asked. Tomorrow night I leave for the outer system. I will return with our allies just before the conclave begins. Everything will be ready. Tejo waited until both conspirators had left before moving. His mind raced with possibilities. He had to warn someone, but who could he trust? The admiral was involved, which meant the palace guard might be compromised. Other nobles might be part of the plot. The next morning, Tejo requested a private audience with Queen Myung. It was unusual, but his status as Thamor allowed it. The queen received him in her private chamber, a room filled with ancient weapons and trophies from past wars. She listened without interruption as Tejo described what he had overheard. When he finished, the queen was quiet for a long time. Her tentacles moved slowly, the way they did when she was thinking deeply. You are certain of what you heard? She asked finally. Yes, Your Majesty. And you expect me to act on this information? The question surprised Tejo. The Duke is planning to murder your daughter. Yes, the queen said calmly. He is. Tejo stared at her. You knew? I suspected. Jinho has never hidden his ambitions, nor has he hidden his disapproval of Era's ideas. Then why don't you stop him? The queen stood and walked to a window overlooking the palace training grounds. Below, young Velkans practice combat forms in the pale light. Tell me, Thamor, what makes a worthy ruler? Wisdom, compassion, strength when needed. Strength, the queen repeated. Yes, above all, strength. A ruler who cannot defend themselves cannot defend their people. Tejo felt ice forming in his stomach. You're going to let him try to kill her. I am going to let her prove herself. If she is strong enough, clever enough, she will survive. If not, the queen shrugged, that's insane. She's your daughter. The queen turned on him, and for a moment Tejo saw the predator that had conquered half the galaxy. She is my heir. That is more important than being my daughter. Would you have me put a weak ruler on the throne? Someone who cannot handle court intrigue? I won't let her die, Tejo said firmly. You will do your duty as Thamor. Nothing more, nothing less. You will protect her from direct threats, but you will not interfere with the natural order of succession. And if she dies? Then Jinho will be the next ruler, and perhaps that is what our people need. A traditional leader for traditional times. Tejo left the audience chamber feeling sick. The queen was using her own daughter as a test subject. Era had no idea that her mother had essentially given permission for her assassination. That evening, as he stood guard outside the princess's chambers, Tejo made his decision. The queen had ordered him not to interfere with the natural order. But there was nothing natural about hired killers attacking during a religious ceremony. He was Thamor. His duty was to protect Princess Aira. If that meant disobeying the queen, so be it. The conclave of tides would begin in 10 days. Teho had 10 days to figure out how to save the princess without getting them both killed in the process. The Great Hall had been transformed for the conclave of tides. Thousands of glowing crystals hung from the ceiling, casting shifting patterns of blue and green light across the walls. The floor was covered with shallow pools of water that reflected the lights like scattered stars. Princess Aira wore ceremonial robes that flowed around her like liquid silver. She looked beautiful and fragile at the same time. Teho stood at the edge of the hall, watching everything with the eyes of a soldier. Hundreds of Velkan nobles filled the space. They moved gracefully through the water, their robes trailing behind them. To an outsider, it looked like an elegant dance. To Teho, it looked like a hunting ground. Duke Jinho had returned from his mysterious trip 2 days ago. He brought with him a dozen honor guests from other worlds. They claimed to be diplomats and traders, but Teho recognized soldiers when he saw them. They were too alert, too careful about where they positioned themselves. The ceremony begins at the tide change. Princess Aira had explained to him earlier. All participants will enter the flowing state, a kind of meditation that connects us to our ancestors. We become one with the water and the tides. How long does this last? Teho had asked. Hours, until the tide changes again. During that time, we are vulnerable. That's why the ceremony is considered sacred. It requires complete trust. Trust that was about to be betrayed. Teho had spent the last 10 days preparing as best he could. He couldn't bring weapons into the sacred hall, but he had hidden small tools around the room during the setup. A maintenance knife taped under one platform, a length of wire coiled behind a pillar. Improvised weapons for a desperate fight. The ceremony began with ancient chants. The queen stood at the center of the hall, her voice joining with the others in harmonies that seemed to make the water itself vibrate. Princess Aira took her place in the inner circle, surrounded by the most important nobles. As the chanting continued, Teho watched the duke's guests carefully. They were spreading out around the hall, moving to positions that would give them good firing angles. Their hand movements were too practiced, too smooth. These were professional killers. The flowing state began gradually. One by one, the Velkans entered their trance-like meditation. Their eyes closed, their movements became slow and dreamlike. They swayed with the rhythm of imaginary tides, completely unaware of their surroundings. Princess Aira was among the last to enter the state. As her eyes closed and her body relaxed, Teho felt his heart rate increase. She was defenseless now, trusting in the sacred nature of the ceremony to protect her. Duke Jinho stood near the back of the hall. He was not participating in the ceremony, claiming he needed to observe as the evening's host. His eyes met Teho's across the water and he smiled coldly. The attack came at the ceremony's peak. One of the Duke's men drew a pulse weapon from under his diplomatic robes. The blue energy bolt cut through the misty air, aimed directly at Princess Aira's head. Teho moved without thinking. His voice shattered the sacred silence as he shouted a warning. Attack! Protect the princess! The energy bolt missed Aira by inches as she instinctively ducked. All around the hall, Velkans jerked out of their meditation, confused and disoriented. More weapons appeared. The killers had planned well, but they hadn't expected resistance from a human guard. Teho was already moving, his weak left arm forgotten in the rush of combat. He reached the first attacker before the man could fire again. The maintenance knife appeared in Teho's hand and he drove it up under the killer's ribs. The man dropped his weapon and fell backward into the shallow water. Blasphemer, someone screamed. He has violated the sacred ceremony. Teho didn't have time to worry about religious law. 2 more attackers were closing on Princess Aira, who was still stunned from being jerked out of her meditation. He threw his knife at one man, catching him in the throat, then tackled the other. They went down together in the shallow water. The killer was stronger than Teho and not handicapped by old injuries. But Teho fought dirty, using his elbow to break the man's nose and his knee to crush his solar plexus. Around the hall, chaos erupted. Some nobles tried to flee, while others demanded to know what was happening. The palace guards were confused, not sure whether to stop the attackers or arrest Teho for breaking the sacred ritual. Duke Jinho used the confusion to his advantage. The human has gone mad, he shouted. He attacks innocent guests during our most holy ceremony. A pulse blast singed Teho's shoulder as another killer took aim. He rolled sideways, coming up with the length of wire he had hidden earlier. The wire caught the attacker around the neck, and Teho used it to swing the man into a pillar. But there were too many of them. Even as he fought, more weapons appeared throughout the hall. These weren't just random killers. They were part of a coordinated military assault. Princess Aira was moving now, her combat training taking over. She had found a ceremonial trident and was using it to keep two attackers at bay, but she was still groggy from the interrupted meditation and her movements were slow. Teho fought his way toward her, but another attacker blocked his path. This one was huge, nearly 8 feet tall and built like a mountain. His pulse rifle could have cut Teho in half. The big man fired, but Teho was already moving. He slid under the energy beam and came up inside the giant's reach. His fist connected with the man's knee, snapping it sideways. As the giant fell, Teho grabbed his rifle. Now he had a real weapon. The pulse rifle felt familiar in his hands despite its alien design. He turned toward Princess Aira just in time to see her go down under a stunning blast. Rage filled Teho's vision. He opened fire, cutting down the princess's attackers with precise bursts. The rifle's energy pack wouldn't last long, so every shot had to count. Duke Jinho was shouting orders now, no longer pretending to be innocent. Kill them both! The human and the princess. But his plan was falling apart. The palace guards had finally figured out who the real enemies were and were fighting back. The ceremony hall was becoming a battlefield, with energy bolts and ancient weapons clashing in the shifting light. Teho reached Princess Aira as she struggled to her feet. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were clear. Can you move? He asked. Yes, but Teho, you broke the sacred ritual. The priest will demand your execution. Let me worry about that later. He helped her stand, keeping the rifle ready. Around them, the battle was winding down. Most of the attackers were dead or captured, but Duke Jinho had escaped in the confusion. As the immediate danger passed, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. The most sacred ceremony in Velkan culture had been turned into a bloodbath. Bodies floated in the consecrated pools. The ancient chants had been replaced by screams and weapon fire, and at the center of it all stood Teho, holding an alien weapon and covered in blood. Seize the blasphemer. High Priest Kyungsu's voice carried across the hall. He has defiled the conclave of tides. The remaining palace guards looked uncertain. Teho had just saved the princess's life, but he had also committed the worst sacrilege in Velkan history. Princess Aira stepped in front of him. This man saved my life. He is under my protection. Your Highness, the High Priest said coldly, he violated the most sacred of our ceremonies. The penalty is death regardless of his motives. Queen Myung appeared at the edge of the hall. She looked at the bodies floating in the water, at her injured daughter, and finally at Teho. Guards, she said quietly, arrest the human. As the guards moved forward, Teho let the rifle fall from his hands. He had saved Princess Aira's life, but the cost might be his own. The golden collar around his neck felt heavier than ever as they led him away in chains. He had chosen duty over law, protection over protocol. Now he would face the consequences. Behind him, he heard Princess Aira arguing with her mother, demanding his release. But even a princess's voice seemed small in the face of broken sacred law. The trial would come soon, and with it, judgment for the human who had dared to spill blood in a holy place. The prison beneath the palace was carved from living rock. Water seeped through the walls, and strange glowing fungi provided the only light. Teho had been there for 5 days waiting for his trial. The guards brought him food and water but wouldn't speak to him. He was a blasphemer now, untouchable. His left arm ached constantly in the damp air. The old injuries from the rescue seemed worse here, as if the prison itself was eating away at his strength. But his mind was clear. He had done what needed to be done. Princess Aira was alive. That mattered more than his own fate. On the morning of the 6th day, they came for him. 2 guards and High Priest Kyungsu, who looked at Teho like he was something disgusting. Your trial begins now, the priest said. Prepare to face judgment for your crimes against the sacred order. They led him through corridors he had never seen before, deep in the heart of the palace. The walls were covered with ancient carvings showing the history of the Velkan people, great battles, religious ceremonies, the rise and fall of dynasties. Taeho wondered if his own story would someday be carved here, if anyone would remember the human who broke their most sacred law to save a life. The trial chamber was smaller than he had expected. The queen sat on a simple throne with Princess Aira standing beside her. A panel of judges, priests, nobles, and military officers occupied one side of the room. On the other side sat Duke Jinho, looking confident despite the failed assassination attempt. Taeho Kim, Queen Myung began. You stand accused of the highest blasphemy. You disrupted the conclave of tides, spilled blood in a sacred space, and violated centuries of religious law. How do you answer these charges? Taeho straightened his shoulders. I am guilty of all these things, Your Majesty. But I had no choice. The ceremony was being used as cover for an assassination attempt. So you claim, High Priest Kyung-soo interrupted. But you have no proof. Only the word of a human against respected Velkan nobles. I have proof, Queen Myung said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Even Duke Jinho looked surprised. The queen gestured and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed Duke Jinho meeting with off-world contacts in a dingy spaceport cantina. The audio was clear. The princess must die, the Duke was saying. Her human-influenced ideas will destroy our empire. I have arranged for specialists to handle the situation during the conclave. The recording continued, showing the Duke paying the assassins and giving them detailed plans of the ceremony hall. There was no question about his guilt. Where did you get this? Duke Jinho demanded. I have had you watched for months, the queen replied. Did you think your plotting was secret? I know about every meeting, every payment, every plan. Princess Aira stepped forward. Mother, if you knew about the plot, why didn't you stop it? The queen looked at her daughter with something that might have been sadness. Because I needed to know if you were strong enough to survive it. A ruler who cannot handle assassination attempts has no business on the throne. You used me as bait, Aira said, her voice full of shock and hurt. I gave you a test. You passed thanks to your guardian here. The queen nodded toward Taeho. He chose loyalty over law, duty over ritual. These are the qualities of a true protector. High Priest Kyung-soo was not satisfied. The sacred law was still broken. The penalty must still be paid. Yes, the queen agreed. But perhaps the penalty need not be death. She stood and walked to the center of the room. Duke Jinho, you are guilty of treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy with foreign agents. The penalty is exile and the loss of all titles and property. The Duke's face turned pale blue. You cannot. I can and I have. Guards, escort the former Duke to a transport ship. He will be taken to the frontier worlds and left there. As the guards dragged Duke Jinho away, he shouted curses and threats. But his power was broken. His co-conspirators would follow him into exile or worse. The queen turned back to Taeho. Now for your crimes. You violated sacred law, but you did so to protect the royal family. This presents a problem. Execute him and be done with it, one of the judges muttered. No, Princess Aira said firmly. He saved my life. I won't let him die for it. The law is clear, High Priest Kyung-soo insisted. Blasphemy in the sacred hall requires death. The queen raised her hand for silence. There is another way. An ancient law rarely used. The right of royal adoption. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Even Taeho, who had studied Velkan customs extensively, had never heard of this law. If a member of the royal family formally adopts someone into the house, that person becomes Velkan in the eyes of the law, the queen explained. They are subject to different rules, different penalties. Mother, what are you saying? Princess Aira asked. I am saying that Captain Taeho Kim has proven himself worthy of joining our family. Not as a servant or a guardian, but as an equal. The queen's tentacles moved slowly, a sign of deep thought. Princess Aira, if you choose to marry this human, he becomes a prince of the royal house. His crimes would be forgiven and he would be free to leave if he chooses. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Marry a human? It was unthinkable. It was revolutionary. Princess Aira stared at her mother, then at Taeho. And if I refuse? Then he dies for blasphemy and you lose the only person who has ever put your life before everything else. Taeho found his voice. Your Majesty, you can't ask the princess to marry me just to save my life. That's not fair to her. I'm not asking her, the queen replied. I'm asking you. Will you accept adoption into the royal house through marriage to Princess Aira? Will you help her lead our people into a new age of cooperation with other species? Taeho looked at Princess Aira. In the months since he had become her guardian, he had grown to respect her intelligence and compassion. She was nothing like the spoiled royal he had expected. But marriage? What does the princess want? He asked. Era was quiet for a long moment. I want to save your life. But more than that, I want someone beside me who understands that the galaxy is bigger than just our world. Someone who can help me build bridges instead of walls. You barely know me, Tejo said. I know you risked everything to save me. I know you chose duty over safety. I know you see me as a person, not just a title. She smiled. We can learn the rest as we go. High Priest Kyung-Soo was still protesting.
This is madness!
A human in the royal family? This is evolution, the queen said sharply. Our empire has grown stagnant. We need new ideas, new perspectives. This marriage will show other species that Vulcans can change, can grow. She turned back to Tejo. What is your answer? Will you marry my daughter and help lead our people? Or will you choose death with honor? Tejo thought about his old life on Earth, his military career, his apartment that he would never see again. Then he thought about Princess Era and her dreams of a better future for all species. I accept, he said. The wedding ceremony took place a week later in the same hall where the assassination attempt had occurred. The bloodstains had been cleaned away, and new crystals hung from the ceiling, but everyone remembered what had happened there. Tejo wore traditional Vulcan wedding robes that had been modified for his human body. The golden collar of Thamor had been replaced with the silver circlet of a prince. Princess Era looked radiant in flowing white that seemed to capture and reflect the light of the ceremony crystals. As they spoke their vows in the ancient language,
Tejo felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders.
He was no longer just a guardian. He was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of cooperation between species that had never trusted each other. Hyunwoo and So Young had returned from Earth to witness the ceremony. They stood with the human diplomatic delegation, looking proud and amazed at their former captain's transformation. Do you regret it? Princess Era asked him quietly as the ceremony ended. Giving up your old life for this? Tejo looked out at the assembled nobles and diplomats, human and alien faces mixed together for the first time in Vulcan history. Ask me again in 50 years, she laughed, a sound like water over stones. I will. As they walked together from the ceremony hall, Tejo realized that his rescue of the princess had been just the beginning. The real work, building a future where different species could live and work together, was just starting. But for the first time since he had put on that failing environmental suit to save an alien princess, Tejo felt like he was exactly where he belonged.